At exactly 8:17 on a rainy Friday night, Adrian Vale walked into the most expensive hotel in the capital, raised a glass, and proposed to the one woman who had spent 3 years trying to destroy him. Her name was Mira Han. She was the brilliant heir of the Han Consortium, the sharpest negotiator in the city, and Adrian's deadliest rival. Their families competed in everything: shipping routes, technology contracts, private clubs, even the charity awards they pretended not to care about. When Adrian and Mira entered the same room, conversations stopped. Nobody expected a wedding. In fact, most people expected one of them to leave in handcuffs. But that night, Adrian had just learned that his company's board planned to remove him before sunrise. Mira had also discovered that someone inside her family was selling confidential information. Both of them were exhausted, angry, and surrounded by people who wanted them to fail. Then Adrian's friends challenged him to drink until he could finally say what he really thought of Mira. He accepted, mostly because he was too proud to refuse. A few hours later, with the orchestra playing and the entire ballroom watching, Adrian crossed the floor. Mira lifted an eyebrow and asked whether he had finally come to surrender. Adrian dropped to one knee. The room fell silent. Then he said the sentence that would change both families forever. "Mira Han, marry me." The applause came before anyone realized that Adrian was completely serious. To understand why the proposal was so shocking, we have to go back to the beginning. Adrian and Mira had met as teenagers at a national debate final. Adrian was confident, quick with numbers, and certain that every problem could be solved by taking the boldest possible position. Mira was quieter. She listened until everyone else had revealed their weaknesses, then ended the argument with one sentence nobody could answer. Adrian won that first debate by a single point. Mira remembered the loss for 6 years. After graduation, Adrian joined Vale Industries, a company known for turning neglected businesses into market leaders. Mira entered the Han Consortium, a much older empire with interests in logistics, finance, and renewable energy. Their first official competition involved a coastal redevelopment project. Adrian offered speed and lower costs. Mira offered stability and a long-term plan. The city awarded the project to Mira, but Adrian convinced 3 major partners to join his next venture. Neither victory felt complete because the other person was always standing nearby. Their rivalry became a legend. They exchanged polite smiles at public events and launched ruthless counteroffers the next morning. If Adrian opened an office in one district, Mira bought the building across the street. If Mira sponsored a research team, Adrian funded a competing laboratory. Newspapers called them the Golden Heirs. Their employees called them storms wearing expensive clothes. Still, the rivalry had rules. They never lied directly to each other. They never attacked family members. And no matter how hard they competed, each privately admitted the same truth. The other person was the only opponent who made the game interesting. The disaster began at a board meeting. Adrian arrived expecting to discuss Vale Industries' expansion into medical technology. Instead, he found 6 directors seated in a line, with his uncle Victor at the center. Victor had prepared a vote accusing Adrian of reckless spending. The accusation was exaggerated, but the evidence looked convincing. Several contracts had been signed under Adrian's authorization, and millions had disappeared into companies he had never heard of. Adrian tried to defend himself, but every answer created another question. Before the meeting ended, Victor announced that the board would vote at 9 the next morning. If Adrian lost, he would be removed as chief executive and blamed for the entire scandal. Across town, Mira was having an equally terrible evening. Her cousin June had discovered that someone was leaking confidential bids from the Han consortium. Every leak benefited a mysterious investment group called North Star. Mira suspected a senior executive, but the trail disappeared whenever she got close. Then her father told her to stop investigating. He said the company could survive a few lost contracts. Mira knew that meant he was afraid of what the investigation might uncover. Both heirs went to the same hotel because the annual founders' banquet was impossible to avoid. They entered through separate doors, carrying separate crises. Adrian ordered a drink. Mira ordered tea. 10 minutes later, Adrian's friends began teasing him about Mira. Someone joked that if he spent less time fighting her, he might notice that she was the only person in the room who understood him. Adrian laughed. Then he asked for another drink.
By midnight, the banquet had changed from a formal dinner into a loud, glittering mess. Adrian's tie was loose. Mira had abandoned her tea and was studying the room with the focus of a detective. She noticed that Adrian kept checking his phone. He noticed that she had not touched the dessert placed in front of her. "You look miserable," Mira said. "You look disappointed that I'm still standing," Adrian replied. "Tomorrow might fix that." Under normal circumstances, Adrian would have answered with a sharper insult, but the alcohol had dissolved the careful wall he kept around his feelings. He asked whether she had ever been tired of fighting. Mira said the question was dangerous because it sounded almost honest. A waiter brought another round. Adrian's friend raised a glass and challenged him to tell Mira what he really wanted. Adrian stared at her. For 3 years, he had told himself that he wanted to beat her. Yet every time Mira disappeared from a negotiation, the room felt smaller. Every time she was praised, he felt a strange mixture of irritation and pride. And whenever someone else treated her unfairly, Adrian became angry before he understood why. Mira leaned closer. "Well?" Adrian stood. The orchestra had started a slow song, and several guests turned to watch him. He walked across the polished floor, stopped in front of Mira, and dropped to one knee. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Adrian held out his hand and said with astonishing confidence, "Mira Han, marry me. We are already spending our lives together, so we might as well stop pretending this is only business." Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You are going to regret this." Adrian smiled. "That sounds like a yes."
Adrian woke up at 6:30 with a headache, a dry mouth, and no memory of how he had returned to his apartment. His assistant, Lena, was waiting beside the window with 3 phones in her hands. She did not say good morning. She simply turned the largest screen toward him. The headline read, "Vale heir proposes to Han's successor in front of both families." Adrian sat up so quickly that the room spun. There were photographs from 12 different angles. In every image, he was kneeling. In one, Mira was smiling. In another, he was kissing her hand. The clip had already been viewed millions of times. "What happened?" Adrian asked. "You proposed," Lena said. "To whom?" Lena stared at him. The only person in the city who could make this situation worse. Before Adrian could process the answer, his uncle called. Victor congratulated him with a voice that sounded almost sincere. He explained that the board had postponed the vote. The public loved the idea of a Vale-Han alliance, and investors were waiting to see whether the engagement was real. If Adrian denied the proposal, the families would look unstable. If he confirmed it, Victor could use the scandal to force a merger under his control. Then Mira called. Her voice was calm, which was more frightening than anger. She told Adrian to meet her in 1 hour. When he asked whether she planned to slap him, she said that would be an inefficient use of time. Adrian arrived at the agreed cafe expecting humiliation. Mira was already there, with a folder, a fresh cup of tea, and an expression that could freeze boiling water. She pushed the folder across the table. "Your proposal is now a business crisis," she said. so let's make it useful.
The folder contained a draft engagement agreement. Adrian read the first page twice because he assumed the words were a joke. The agreement required him and Mira to appear together at public events for 90 days. They had to release a joint statement, combine selected investigations, and prevent their families from announcing a merger without written approval from both of them. Mira had prepared the contract before Adrian finished his coffee. "You planned this?" he asked. "I planned for the possibility that our families would exploit your mistake." "It was not a mistake." "You proposed while intoxicated." "I remember the important part." "You remembered your own name only after Lena showed you the video." Adrian ignored that detail. He asked what Mira wanted in return. Her answer was simple. She wanted access to Vale Industries' internal audit team because the North Star leaks were connected to one of Adrian's suppliers. In exchange, she would provide the Han Consortium's forensic records and help him expose whoever had fabricated the contracts against him. It was the worst partnership Adrian could imagine, which meant it was probably the most effective. He signed the agreement. Mira signed beneath him. The contract included one final rule: no genuine romantic expectations. Their engagement would be an arrangement, nothing more. Adrian pointed to the clause. "You added this twice. Once for legal clarity, and once because you seemed confused." When they left the cafe, reporters surrounded the entrance. Mira stepped beside Adrian and reached for his arm. The touch was calculated, but it still surprised him. Cameras flashed as they walked into the rain together. For the first time, the public saw them not as rivals, but as a team. Neither family liked the image. North Star liked it even less. Their first public appearance was a charity auction held at the City Museum. Adrian and Mira had less than 24 hours to learn how to look engaged without looking ridiculous. Mira taught Adrian to stop standing like he was preparing for a negotiation. Adrian taught Mira how to answer personal questions without threatening the reporter's entire career. The rehearsal lasted 11 minutes. It ended when Mira told him that his smile looked like a warning label. At the museum, they entered together. Every camera turned toward them. An interviewer asked when they had fallen in love. Adrian began to answer, but Mira squeezed his arm and spoke first. "We realized we trusted each other long before we admitted it." The sentence sounded effortless. Adrian looked at her, and for one dangerous second, he forgot that it was supposed to be a performance. Then a rival executive asked whether the engagement was only a strategy to protect their companies. Adrian expected Mira to dismiss him. Instead, she stepped closer and said, "If it were only strategy, we would have chosen someone easier." The room laughed. The executive retreated. Adrian felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. During the auction, they competed against each other out of habit. A rare painting received bids from both sides until Mira quietly told Adrian that he was being manipulated. He stopped immediately. She won the painting for half the amount she had expected to pay. Later, Adrian discovered that the artist had once helped Mira's mother during a difficult period. Mira had wanted the painting for sentimental reasons, but refused to explain it publicly. Adrian did not tease her. He simply arranged for the painting to be delivered to her family home. Mira stared at him. Why? Because rivals can still pay attention. For the first time, she smiled without pretending.
Their investigations began with the same question: who benefited from the scandals? The answer was North Star. The investment group had acquired shares in companies connected to both families just before every crisis. It was not merely profiting from the chaos, it was creating the chaos, then buying the damaged pieces at a discount. Adrian's audit team traced the fraudulent contracts to a digital signature used by a senior manager inside Vale Industries. Mira's analysts found the same pattern in the Han Consortium's leaked bids. The files had been copied through an old data center that both companies used before their rivalry became public. That discovery forced Adrian and Mira to visit the abandoned facility together. The building stood beneath an elevated railway, hidden behind warehouses and construction fencing. Dust covered the equipment, but one server still showed signs of recent use. Mira noticed a fresh scratch near the security panel. Adrian found a paper cup on the floor with the logo of a private club owned by his uncle Victor. They looked at each other. "Your uncle," Mira said. "Possibly." "You say that as if he has never tried to ruin you. He usually prefers direct methods." Inside the server room, they found a hidden archive containing months of copied documents. The newest file had been created that morning. It contained a schedule of the board vote that Victor had claimed was confidential. Someone had known about the vote before Adrian's meeting. Then, the lights went out. A door slammed somewhere in the corridor. Mira reached for Adrian's sleeve, not because she was afraid, but because she did not want to lose him in the dark. Adrian switched on his phone light. Together, they followed the sound to a rear exit and found only a small metal case left on the pavement. Inside was a photograph of Adrian and Mira at the banquet. Written across the back were 4 words: "Your engagement is our opportunity."
The photograph changed the rules. Until then, Adrian and Mira had treated the engagement as protection from their families. Now they understood that someone outside the families was watching every move. The threat was not subtle. It wanted them to know that the proposal had created an opening. Mira suggested canceling the engagement. Adrian refused. "If we end it now, whoever is watching will know the threat worked. And if we continue, then we decide what happens next." Mira studied him. "You are much more reasonable when you are sober." "I am trying to make a good impression." The next day, they released a joint statement announcing a 90-day engagement and a collaborative review of both companies' internal security. The statement was carefully written, but the final line was personal. "We will face this together." Investors reacted positively. Their share prices stabilized. Employees began exchanging rumors about the impossible couple. Even their families were forced to behave cautiously in public. Privately, the arrangement became more complicated. Adrian learned that Mira worked late because she hated asking others to carry burdens she believed belonged to her. Mira discovered that Adrian kept a handwritten list of every employee whose family depended on his company. He was not reckless because he enjoyed danger. He was reckless because he believed failure would hurt people who trusted him. One evening, they argued over a decision to expose Victor. Mira wanted proof strong enough to survive court. Adrian wanted to move before Victor could destroy more records. The argument ended with silence in the executive office. Mira finally asked, "What did you really mean when you proposed?" Adrian looked out at the city lights. "I meant that I was tired of imagining my future without you in it." The answer was too honest to be part of their contract. Neither of them mentioned the clause about having no romantic expectations.
The breakthrough came from Lena. She discovered that the fraudulent contracts had not been created by Victor's office. They had been approved by Adrian's trusted operations director, Samuel. Samuel had worked for Vale Industries for 15 years and had personally helped Adrian build the expansion program. Adrian refused to believe it. Mira did not argue. She showed him the transaction trail. Samuel had received payments through 3 shell companies, then transferred part of the money to an account connected to North Star. The evidence was real, but one detail bothered Mira. The payments began only 6 weeks earlier, after Samuel's younger brother was arrested for a debt-related fraud case. They confronted Samuel privately. He broke down and admitted that North Star had threatened his family. He had altered contracts, but he claimed he never intended to destroy Adrian. He thought he was buying time. "Who is North Star?" Adrian asked. Samuel said he had never met the real decision-maker. Every instruction came through a consultant named Elias Rowe. Mira recognized the name. Elias had once been her father's most trusted advisor. He had disappeared from the Han consortium after a failed acquisition and was believed to have left the country. The revelation created a new problem. If Elias was behind North Star, then the conspiracy had been growing for years, long before Adrian's drunken proposal. Their rivalry may not have been natural at all. Someone could have been encouraging both families to compete while quietly weakening them. That night, Mira found Adrian alone in the hallway. He was holding the photograph from the abandoned data center. "You should be angry," she said. "I am." "At me?" "Not yet." Mira understood the question he was not asking. Had she known more than she admitted? Had her family used the rivalry for its own advantage?
For the first time since the proposal, trust felt more fragile than attraction.
Mira took Adrian to a private archive beneath the Han family library. She showed him records from 20 years earlier, when their parents had been business partners. At that time, Vale Industries and the Han Consortium had planned to create a joint research foundation. The project was canceled after a financial report accused Adrian's father of stealing funds. The report had never been independently verified. According to the archive, Mira's father believed the accusation. Adrian's family believed the Han Consortium had leaked it to damage their reputation. The partnership ended, and both families spent the next 2 decades competing for control of the same markets. Adrian read the original report. The numbers did not match the accounting standards used at the time. Several pages had been inserted later. A signature belonged to a consultant who had been working for both families, Elias Rowe. The discovery explained the rivalry, but it did not erase the damage. Adrian remembered how his father had avoided speaking about the Han family. Mira remembered her mother warning her never to trust a Vale. Their childhood assumptions had become adult loyalties before either of them could question them. Mira admitted that she had once believed Adrian was heartless. Adrian admitted that he had believed Mira enjoyed humiliating him. Both beliefs were convenient because they made hatred easier than curiosity. They spent the night comparing old records. By dawn, they had built a timeline showing that every major conflict between the families had followed the same pattern: a forged document, a public accusation, and a financial crisis that benefited Elias's network. Mira reached for a file, and her hand touched Adrian's. Neither moved away. Then a message appeared on Adrian's phone from an unknown number. It contained a single sentence: "Ask Mira why her father protected Elias." The room became cold again.
Mira insisted that her father could not have protected Elias. Adrian wanted to believe her, but the message had arrived with a scanned bank transfer. The transfer showed that Mira's father had paid Elias a large sum after the original partnership collapsed. They confronted him the same afternoon. Mira's father did not deny the payment. Instead, he explained that Elias had threatened to release documents proving that the original research foundation had been used to move money illegally. The documents were forged, but they looked convincing enough to destroy both families. Mira's father paid Elias to keep the evidence hidden while he searched for proof of the forgery. He failed. Then illness forced him to step away from daily operations, and the family chose silence rather than risk another scandal. Mira was furious. Not because her father had been frightened, but because he had allowed her to grow up believing that the Vales were responsible for everything. She left the room before he finished speaking. Adrian followed her to the garden. She told him that she needed time alone. He stayed anyway, at a respectful distance. "I spent half my life trying to defeat a story that was never true," she said. "So did I. What happens when the story ends?" Adrian answered, "We write a better one." The words were simple, but they reached her. Mira finally admitted that she had accepted the engagement because she wanted access to Adrian's records. She had not expected to care whether he trusted her. Adrian confessed that he had proposed because, even while drunk, he had said what he had been too proud to say sober. Before either could say more, Lena arrived with urgent news. Elias Rowe had scheduled a private meeting with both families for the following morning. He was offering to settle the old dispute. Mira looked at Adrian. "He wants us in the same room." Adrian nodded. "Then we make sure he regrets inviting us regretting it."
The meeting took place in Founders Hall, the building where Vale Industries and the Han Consortium had first signed their partnership agreement. Elias arrived early. He was older than Adrian remembered from photographs, but his calm expression had not changed. He presented himself as a mediator who wanted to prevent another generation from repeating the mistakes of the past. He offered a settlement. The families would combine their companies under a new holding group. Elias's investment network would provide emergency capital. In return, Adrian and Mira would remain public co-chairs, preserving the image of unity created by their engagement. It sounded generous. It was also a trap. Mira had discovered that Northstar did not have enough capital to save either company. The money would come from assets hidden inside the old foundation, meaning the merger would allow Elias to control funds he had been stealing for years. Adrian signaled Lena. She activated the presentation screens, showing the original documents, the altered reports, and the payments to Samuel. Mira added the final piece, a recording of Elias instructing an intermediary to leak the board schedule. Elias did not panic. He smiled and said the evidence could be fabricated. Then Victor stood and accused Adrian of staging the entire investigation to seize control of Vale Industries. For a moment, Adrian seemed surrounded. His uncle had chosen Elias's side. Mira's father was silent. The board members looked uncertain. Then Mira stepped forward and placed the engagement contract on the table. She pointed to the clause giving both of them authority to block any forced merger. "This is not a marriage between companies," she said. "It is a promise that neither of us will surrender control to people who profit from our distrust." Adrian took her hand in front of everyone. The gesture was not part of the contract. That was precisely why it mattered.
The evidence triggered investigations in both companies. Victor resigned before the board could remove him. Elias disappeared for 2 days, then was arrested while attempting to leave the country. Samuel cooperated with the authorities and accepted responsibility for the contracts he had altered. The old partnership was not restored overnight, but the families finally stopped blaming each other long enough to examine the truth. For Adrian and Mira, the crisis should have ended with the engagement contract. 90 days had passed. The companies were stable. The public expected a breakup announcement, followed by a respectful statement about returning to separate paths. Mira drafted that statement herself. Adrian found her in the office after midnight, reading the final paragraph. She said the arrangement had accomplished its purpose. They had protected their companies, exposed Elias, and corrected the history that had kept their families apart. Adrian asked whether she wanted to end it. Mira said she had spent years believing that love made people weak. Then she looked at him and admitted that the real weakness was pretending not to care, because caring created something another person could hurt. Adrian took a small box from his coat. Mira assumed it contained another contract. Inside was a ring, simple and unmarked, chosen without help from either family. "This time," he said, "I am completely sober." Mira did not answer immediately. She reminded him that his first proposal had been dramatic, inconvenient, and legally confusing. Adrian agreed with every criticism. Then he said, "But it was honest." Mira closed the box, placed it back in his hand, and told him that she would accept only if he understood one condition. Adrian asked what it was. "You still have to let me win sometimes." He smiled. "I can promise to try." Mira kissed him before he could negotiate. A year later, the Vale Han Foundation opened its first research center. The project was built from the partnership their parents had lost, and their children had finally recovered. Adrian remained chief executive of Vale Industries. Mira became chair of the new foundation and continued to challenge every proposal he brought to the table. They still argued over budgets. They still competed during charity auctions. Mira still found ways to outmaneuver Adrian in negotiations, and Adrian still pretended to be offended whenever she did. Their employees learned that a meeting was never truly finished until one of them had made the other laugh. The public eventually stopped calling them the capital's most dangerous rivals. The new nickname was less dramatic: the couple who could turn an argument into a strategy. At their wedding, Adrian's friends prepared a speech about the night he proposed while drunk. Mira interrupted before they could finish. She told the guests that the alcohol had only removed Adrian's fear of saying what he already knew. Adrian added that the real surprise was not the proposal. It was waking up and discovering that Mira had turned his worst decision into the best partnership of his life. Mira corrected him. "It was not your worst decision. It was your first honest one." The guests laughed, but Adrian understood the truth beneath the joke. Their story had begun with rivalry, suspicion, and a reckless question asked in front of hundreds of witnesses. It survived because they learned to investigate the past instead of obeying it. They chose trust without pretending it was easy. And they discovered that the person who challenged you most fiercely could also be the person who saw you most clearly. So after getting drunk, Adrian accidentally proposed to his deadliest rival. But the part he never accidentally said was this: Mira was never the enemy he had to defeat.
She was the person he had been waiting to stand beside. And this time, when she said yes, nobody had to wonder whether he would remember it in the morning.